Hi, Gil. Thank you for talking with me today. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Gilbert Hale. I work as a computer consultant, and I've pretty much traveled most of the United States when my father was in the military as a physician.
What kind of situations have you been in that's required survival skills?
None that require survival skills like loss of limb, loss of life for myself personally, but I grew up in Southern California for most of my life, and we had a lot of activity out there with earthquakes, obviously, but more important, wildfires, which are, in my opinion, far more dangerous than earthquakes.
Why do you say that?
With an earthquake, when it happens, it happens. You might get some aftershocks, but the damage is done. You can get on with life and start recovering from it. With a wildfire, when it's coming, there's more coming, and it could go on for weeks, raging, destroying homes, property, people's lives are in jeopardy. It can be a far more devastating situation.
Was there ever a time where you were scared for your life that you weren't going to be okay?
No, because I pretty much was able to take action to keep myself out of harm's way. I felt comfortable that I wasn't going to be allowing myself to get into any immediate danger to my own person.
Now that you've experienced earthquakes and forest fires, would you have done anything differently?
Probably not a whole lot differently. Being prepared mentally, I think, was more important than anything else. Knowing that these things can happen in Southern California, not letting it alarm me or frighten me. But I was also very aware of what I was doing when I was reacting to the situations at hand.
How much of it do you think is gut or an instinct?
A lot of it, in my particular case, there was the first wildfire that I experienced when I was on my own. I had a house, and my wife and children were living there, and I was working one day, and I smelled what I thought was a little whiff of smoke in the air. This was in San Bernardino, California, and we were right next to the mountains, and I looked up into the foothills, and I saw a little plume of smoke on the far side of a foothill, might have been 14 miles away. And I decided that I better go home and start acting immediately. It was just a gut instinct. No one had sounded any alarms or anything else. And by the time I was packed up and ready to go, the fire was within 1,400 feet of the house.
Wow. Do you do you worry about another more natural disasters happening, and or do you think it's blown out of proportion by the media?
In my opinion, natural disasters are going to happen. It's part of the human experience. There's nothing we can do about it. Our planet is always in rage about something. But as far as the media overblowing it, one thing that really irritates me is when I am living out here in the state of New York and I hear there's a wildfire in Southern California, and the media blows it so far out of proportion, makes it sound like it's the worst thing in the whole world, and to find out it's a small brush fire. It's alarmist almost, and I resent them utilizing that opportunity to leverage commercial time to sell more commercials. But that's the business they're in.
If you were warned about an impending natural disaster, would you plan and execute different escape routes, or would you wait around until you thought you had to go?
I think it's a situation where I wouldn't wait around. I don't tend to be a coward, but I also tend to be reasonable. And my concern wouldn't be so much getting out timely to get out before the flames get to me, but rather getting out before there is a traffic jam with other people suddenly realizing they need to get out also. I would not wait for someone to say it was time to evacuate. I would take those things that are most important to me and get out of Dodge.
So, what items are most important to you? What would you save or make sure that you kept in good condition?
We'll go ahead and say humans and pets first. And from there, any important documents I typically keep in a bank safe, but I do work with computers a lot. So if I could, I would get all the documents and backup tapes I could for all the data for my clients. If I wasn't able to do that, I have copies of those, albeit 1 or 2 weeks old, off-site in a bank safe, so it wouldn't be a total loss if I left it behind.
But you would say that your family and your animals are way more important than any material
Life,
possession.
absolutely.
How important is it to have water and ID and food and proper clothing?
Identification, I would say, is pretty important. Clothing, food, these things can be had. I wouldn't put myself at risk trying to pack things of that nature if I didn't have to. If I had time to, I would, because I'd be less reliant in the short term on other people to take care of the changing situation. But I wouldn't go out of my way to worry about that. That's not the kind of natural disaster that, in my estimation, requires that kind of response or preparation.
In a scenario with evacuation, are other friends or family members able to contact you? Like all the cell phones are down, is there a way to contact you?
Probably not. We pretty much know intuitively when there's something happening. We could find someone on our doorstep. My parents would expect that to happen. We have other friends that my son and daughter and my former wife, there was a wildfire that was raging, and they showed up at my friend's parents' house and they were taken in. It was a very kind thing for them to do, but people pull together in tough spots like that.
Is it important to know your neighbors? Because I've read that neighbors will help you first. They're there before policemen and firefighters.
I'd say it's probably important to know them, but I don't think I'd rely upon them. Probably more because I don't trust human nature in times of desperation. I wouldn't expect a neighbor to lay his or her life down for my benefit necessarily. For them to help me with communication and what's going on and look over there, that's one thing. But to expect them to put themselves in harm's way for my benefit, I wouldn't ask anyone to do that. That's my responsibility.
If you felt the need to evacuate, but a loved one or close friend refused to leave with you, would it be hard for you to leave them, or would you stay? What would you do? And have you ever experienced this?
Interesting question. I have a situation that could come to that. My father is debilitated with a nervous disorder that's affected his mind. In his case, he and my mother live together. He has 24/7 caregivers that are with him all the time. But if there were a fire in their area, and they are in a fire entrapment area in Southern California, and he was absolutely refusing to leave the house, and he could not be forced out, I wouldn't expect the caregivers or my mother to stay with him. He would be in his own. It's unfortunate. I wouldn't want to see it happen, but that's real life.
So are you saying you should evaluate your risk factors? If you're overweight, if you're a certain age, where you live, is that very important to think about?
Yeah, I'd say that upon being asked about that, that would be important. If I were morbidly obese and found it difficult to get around, then yes, I would expect that it's incumbent upon me. It's my responsibility to make sure I give myself more time to get out of a place so I don't cause a problem for myself or, frankly, for others.
People take fire drills as not a big deal. Is it important to practice fire drills with your family or practice escape routes?
I think that if it is mandated by law, let's say fire drills that are required by local legislation for businesses, that could be important, and it would be probably more adhered to than not. As far as a family situation is concerned, if there's no imminent threat occurring, the facade would fade away very quickly. The novelty would be gone, and the fire drills really wouldn't be of any impact other than maybe some deep reached memory of some sort. I would like to think common sense would kind of offset that. I'm sure in my case it would.
I know that you love your huskies, but if you were forced to evacuate your home and go to a shelter and you could not bring your dogs in, what would you do?
Stay with the huskies.
The huskies.
Stay with the huskies, absolutely. It's not their fault they're in that situation. Things like this tend to be a tragedy and difficult to deal with in the short run. In the longer run, things smooth out. I wouldn't want to look back and regret not sticking with the huskies. They're our responsibility.
How much is luck and how much is being prepared and knowing what to do and having life skills to survive?
I think life skills and intuition probably play a lot more into it than anything else. Absence of a clear plan and practice, as we had discussed a little while ago, kind of precludes that being an important factor realistically. As far as luck, I think following intuition, using common sense, we make our own luck when it comes to stuff like that.
do you think it's important to share stories for everyone to be informed, no matter what the disaster is or what the crisis is? Do you think it's important to tell stories and have people be informed on different types of media or blogs? Do you think that's an important thing to do?
Yeah, I think so. Even any casual personal sense, for instance, when you and I first started talking about doing this interview process, I had mentioned to you that one of the things I was concerned about is not getting out of the neighborhood in Southern California in time to beat the mad rush with other folks trying to escape at the same time. Folks getting trapped on a road, a fire jumps the road, and people get incinerated that way. Uh, you probably wouldn't have considered that, but now that you've heard that, if you found yourself in a situation, you would consider it. So yes, I think that is important, but I wouldn't make a big deal of it.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Gil.
Sure.